The movie begins with a young couple named Pippa and Thomas as they move into their first apartment together in Montreal. Excited to start this new chapter of their lives, they arrive at the building and begin reviewing the tenancy agreement. It has a long list of rules, including a strict policy that prohibits residents from hanging anything in the windows, even curtains. After signing the paperwork, they settle into their new home and celebrate with dinner by the window. The couple begins kissing, but are soon distracted by something outside. Looking through their large window, they realize they have a clear view directly into the apartment across the street. From where they are standing, they can easily see a man and a woman making out inside. Pippa feels uncomfortable and says they should not be watching their new neighbors. Thomas says that they are not spying on anyone. They are simply looking out their own window, and the apartment across the street happens to be visible. Pippa points out that the neighbors may not realize how exposed they are. Thomas, however, believes they know exactly what they are doing and don't mind being seen. As he continues watching, Pippa eventually pulls him away from the window. The following day, Pippa meets up with a friend on her way to work and tells her about the couple living across the street. Her friend jokes that the neighbors are probably exhibitionists and that the polite thing to do is watch them. Pippa argues that just because someone leaves themselves visible doesn't mean other people should invade their privacy. Pippa works as a trainee optometrist in a clinic. During her shift, her boss surprises her with a housewarming gift, a bird feeder for the new apartment. Her boss explains that in Japan, birds are described as two eyes with wings because of their extraordinary vision. Later, Pippa returns home and places the bird feeder outside the apartment window. As they settle in for the evening, Thomas is curious about what their neighbors are doing. Since they don't know their real names, the pair decide to call them Margot and Brent. While casually watching the apartment, they notice Brent choking on something. Both Pippa and Thomas become concerned and rush to the window. They begin banging on the glass and waving their arms, desperately trying to get Margot's attention from another room. Once Margot realizes something is wrong, she rushes over to help Brent. However, Pippa notices that she is not using the correct technique. From across the street, Pippa demonstrates what to do, and Margot follows her instructions. Moments later, Brent is finally able to breathe again. That night, Pippa struggles to fall asleep. She gets out of bed and walks into the kitchen, where she once again looks across at the apartment opposite theirs. There, she notices Margot leaving with a suitcase. With Brent now alone in the apartment, Pippa finds herself continuing to watch him for a while before eventually returning to bed. The next day, as Pippa is heading home from work, she decides to buy a pair of binoculars. That night, with Margot still away, another woman arrives at Brent's apartment. Pippa watches through the binoculars as Brent photographs the woman, including a series of nude photos. As the evening continues, the two eventually sleep together. Pippa calls Thomas over to see what is happening. The pair become completely absorbed in the situation unfolding across the street. The excitement spills over into their own relationship, and they end up sleeping together as well. Later, Pippa remains by the window with the binoculars. Not long afterward, she sees Margot return from her trip and surprises Brent, unaware that he has just spent the evening with another woman. The next day, Pippa and Thomas meet Thomas's sister and her girlfriend for lunch. The conversation eventually turns to the neighbors across the street. After hearing about Brent's behavior while Margot was away, Thomas's sister is convinced that he regularly cheats on her whenever she travels. Her girlfriend suggests that the couple might have an open relationship. Pippa, however, believes that Margot is being deceived. As the discussion continues, Pippa admits that she wishes she could hear what the couple are saying inside their apartment. This reminds Thomas's sister of a story from their college days. She reveals that Thomas and some of his friends once had a crush on a girl at school and built a makeshift long-range listening device using a laser pointer so they could eavesdrop on her conversations. According to her, the entire diabolical plan was Thomas's idea. This immediately catches Pippa's attention, and she starts asking questions about the device. Later, when they return home, Thomas explains the basic concept. He tells her that large glass windows vibrate in response to sound waves. By shining a laser at the glass and measuring the tiny movements of the reflected beam, it is possible to reconstruct the sounds that cause those vibrations. Pippa is eager to try it on their neighbors, but Thomas points out the problems. Besides being illegal, the setup would not work from their apartment. In order to detect the vibrations, they would need the laser beam to reflect back to them, which would require some kind of reflective surface inside the neighbor's apartment. Without something like a mirror positioned in the right place, there would be no practical way to capture the signal. While discussing the idea, they glance across the street and notice that Brent and Margot appear to be preparing for a Halloween party. Pippa and Thomas see it as the perfect opportunity to carry out their plan to secretly place a mirror inside the apartment. Disguised in costumes, they blend in with the other guests and manage to enter the party without attracting attention. Once inside, Brent takes an interest in Pippa. He is charming and flirtatious, insisting on taking photos of the couple. To avoid raising suspicion, Pippa and Thomas go along with the party, spending some time dancing and mingling with the other guests. Eventually, Pippa places a small mirror in a suitable location without anyone noticing. After returning home, they set up their equipment. They direct the laser beam into the apartment and successfully capture the reflected signal. The device works exactly as intended, allowing them to clearly hear conversations taking place across the street. However, what they overhear is far more disturbing than they expected. Margot confronts Brent about his behavior during the party and tells him that she saw him disappear into a bathroom with another woman. Instead of responding to the accusation, Brent asks whether she still loves him. Margot is irritated by the question and refuses to answer. Brent then begins turning the argument against her, suggesting that she wants to leave him and is simply looking for excuses to make him the villain. He accuses her of not trusting him and of being insecure because of his career. Margot starts backing away from her original accusation. By the end of the argument, she is apologizing to him instead. Then Brent suddenly becomes violent. He grabs Margot by the neck and slams her head against the table, breaking her glasses. Watching and listening from their apartment, Pippa and Thomas are deeply disturbed by what they have witnessed. The following day, Pippa gets an unexpected surprise when the woman she knows as Margot walks into the eye clinic where she works. The woman introduces herself as Julia and explains that she needs a new pair of glasses. Despite her nerves, Pippa carries out a full eye examination and helps Julia choose a new frame. The appointment goes so smoothly that Julia suggests that they spend some time together outside of work. Pippa agrees and gives her phone number, and the two make plans to meet over the weekend. Meanwhile, Thomas is working from home when he notices Brent has another model at his apartment for a photo session. He sets up the listening device and begins monitoring the conversation. Brent repeatedly flirts with the model. She tells him to stop and even prepares to leave. However, Brent continues pressuring her and eventually convinces her to stay and sleep with him. Later that day, Pippa tells Thomas about her meeting with Julia and explains that they have arranged to meet again. She feels that Julia could use a genuine friend. Thomas then tells her what he overheard during Brent's latest photo shoot. Hearing about Brent's behavior makes Pippa even more convinced that Julia deserves to know the truth. Thomas, however, believes they have already crossed too many boundaries and should stop spying on the couple altogether. Pippa says she feels a moral obligation to warn Julia about Brent's infidelity. Thomas points out that they moved into the apartment together to build a life of their own. Yet Pippa seems increasingly focused on the people across the street. Unable to resolve the disagreement, Thomas leaves the apartment to cool off. The next day, Pippa meets Julia at a spa, and the two spend the afternoon getting to know each other better. Julia tells Pippa that she seems genuinely passionate about her job. Pippa agrees, but admits that her career came at a cost. She explains that she spent years studying and working toward becoming an optometrist, dedicating so much time and energy to it that there is little room for anything else. Now that all of that effort has paid off, she realizes this is likely what she will be doing for the rest of her life. Julia says she has the opposite problem. Unlike Pippa, she has never been able to settle on a clear direction. She explains that she used to work as a model, but eventually grew tired of the industry because she felt objectified and struggled to find any deeper sense of purpose in it. She says she has countless interests and hobbies she would like to pursue, but lacks the skills or experience to turn any of them into a career. As an example, she jokes that she recently bought a laser printer and is still trying to figure out how to use it properly. The conversation eventually turns to Julia's marriage. She reveals that her husband's name is Sebastian, or Seb for short, and that he is a successful photographer. Julia speaks affectionately about him and insists that he loves her. At the same time, she admits that being married to an artist can be complicated. According to her, Seb is talented and charismatic, but he can also be eccentric, and that often comes with its own challenges. As she talks, Julia becomes emotional. Pippa tries to comfort her, but accidentally calls her Margot. Fortunately, Julia laughs it off. After spending a pleasant afternoon together, the two women say goodbye and head home. Pippa continues monitoring the apartment across the street. One evening, she witnesses Seb entertaining multiple partners while Julia is away. Later, she sees him throw away a used condom. Determined to expose him, Pippa discovers a way to connect to Julia's wireless printer. She prints a message warning Julia that her husband is cheating on her. Pippa watches from her apartment as Julia finds the paper. She crumples the page and throws it away. Not willing to let the matter go, Pippa sends a second message. This time, she tells Julia that if she wants proof, she should check the bathroom trash can. A short time later, Thomas returns and realizes what Pippa has done. Pippa insists that she is only trying to help Julia, but Thomas argues that she has crossed every possible boundary. As they continue arguing, they see Julia walk into the bathroom and retrieve the discarded condom from the trash. The discovery confirms her worst fears, and she breaks down in tears. Moments later, Julia picks up a kitchen knife. Thomas panics and blames Pippa for interfering in a situation that was never hers to control. Fearing the worst, they watch as Julia approaches Seb while holding the knife. For a tense moment, it looks as though she may attack him. However, Julia ultimately cannot bring herself to do it. Instead, she returns to the bathroom, collapses in tears, and remains there crying alone. The emotional fallout leaves both Pippa and Thomas shaken. Thomas goes to bed, while Pippa falls asleep in a chair facing the apartment across the street. The following morning, Pippa finally acknowledges how much her obsession with the neighbors has damaged her relationship. She apologizes to Thomas and promises that she is done watching them. As they embrace, Pippa's attention is drawn back to the apartment across the street. Looking through the window, she sees Seb discover Julia's body in the bathroom. It appears that Julia has taken her own life. Seb collapses beside her, crying as he holds her body. The sight leaves both Pippa and Thomas stunned. Unable to accept the situation, Thomas tells Pippa that he can no longer be with her. He blames her for interfering in the couple's lives, packs his belongings, and leaves the apartment, ending their relationship. The next day, Pippa returns to work, still struggling to process Julia's death. To make matters worse, Julia's new glasses have arrived at the clinic. Following procedure, Pippa has to call the number on file to inform her that they are ready for pickup. Knowing that Julia is dead, Pippa can barely hold herself together during the call. Although she is heartbroken by Julia's death and the end of her relationship with Thomas, Pippa can't stop thinking about Seb. She continues watching him from across the street. One evening, she follows him to a bar. Seb ends up sitting beside her, and the two strike up a conversation. Eventually, Seb admits that he is dealing with the most painful loss of his life. Later, Seb asks if he can photograph her. They return to his apartment, and as the session continues, he gradually persuades her to pose with less and less clothing. Eventually, the two sleep together. Meanwhile, Thomas has second thoughts about the way things ended between them. Hoping to make amends, he returns to the apartment carrying flowers. While waiting, he pours himself a drink from the refrigerator and empties the remainder into the bird feeder outside the window. As he looks across the street, he is stunned by what he sees. Through the apartment windows, he realizes that Pippa is with Seb. The next morning, Pippa leaves Seb's apartment and returns home. When she enters her own apartment, she makes a horrifying discovery. Thomas is dead, having apparently taken his own life. The authorities are called, and Pippa attends Thomas's funeral. During a conversation with her friend, Pippa confesses that she slept with Seb shortly before Thomas died. She is convinced that her actions contributed to the tragedy. However, as far as her friend is concerned, Pippa was single at the time and is unfairly blaming herself for events she could not control. Despite this reassurance, Pippa remains conflicted. She admits that even after everything that has happened, part of her still wants to see Seb again. The problem is that he seems to have disappeared. The only trace of him she can find is a series of posters advertising his latest exhibition. Eventually, Pippa and her friend decide to go to the exhibition. As the event begins, large photographs covered by curtains are displayed throughout the gallery. Seb addresses the crowd and announces that the exhibition is a collaboration with the love of his life, Julia. Then, to Pippa's absolute shock, Julia walks onto the stage, alive and well. Julia then reveals that the project is called Sweet Pippa. Moments later, the curtain covering the first photograph is dropped, revealing the nude portrait of Pippa taken during her night with Seb. As more curtains are pulled back, Pippa realizes that the exhibition is actually about her and Thomas. Seb and Julia then reveal the truth. The apartment rented by Pippa and Thomas belonged to them, and they had been monitoring the couple from the very beginning. The pair explain that while Pippa and Thomas believed they were secretly watching their neighbors, the opposite was also true. Pippa storms out of the gallery angry and humiliated. She breaks into Seb's photography studio and destroys much of his work and equipment. As she later packs up her belongings and prepares to move out of the apartment, she notices something strange below the bird feeder hanging outside her window. Several dead birds are scattered on a grate beneath it. Meanwhile, Seb and Julia continue promoting their exhibition. During one interview, they proudly display the final page of Pippa and Thomas's lease agreement, pointing to a clause that supposedly gave consent to be photographed. The reporters are clearly uncomfortable with what the couple has done and question the ethics of the project. Seb defends their actions by arguing that people should be more careful about what access they give to strangers. Julia points out that they deliberately presented a carefully crafted version of themselves, and Pippa and Thomas willingly became invested in it. Seb boasts that the exhibition has become a massive success. Despite his confidence, he appears agitated. Later, Seb and Julia return home and discover a bottle of wine left outside their apartment as a congratulatory gift. They bring it inside and begin drinking. During the conversation, Seb asks whether she ever feels guilty about what they did. Julia replies that she doesn't. As they continue drinking, a message prints from their wireless printer. The note is from Pippa. It contains a chilling accusation. She knows they killed Thomas. Looking outside, Seb and Julia spot Pippa watching them from a nearby rooftop. They rush out and pursue her. The chase leads them to the clinic where Pippa works. Cornering her inside the clinic, they demand to know what she thinks she has discovered. Pippa explains that she spent months believing everything she saw with her own eyes. However, Thomas's death never felt right to her. The dead bird beneath the feeder made her reconsider everything. She realized that Thomas had drunk from the same bottle whose contents he later poured into the bird feeder. If the substance killed the birds, then someone must have tampered with the drink. Pippa accuses Julia of drugging Thomas while she was with Seb and then staging his death to look like a suicide. Before Julia can properly respond, she suddenly begins struggling to breathe. Pippa then reveals that she poisoned the wine they had been drinking. As the effects take hold, both Seb and Julia collapse to the floor. Using equipment at the clinic, Pippa straps the pair beneath a LASIK machine and deliberately damages their eyes, leaving them blind. Sometime later, two new tenants move into the apartment that once belonged to Pippa and Thomas. From their window, they begin observing the lives of the people across the street. Across from them, Seb and Julia now live in darkness, unable to see that they are once again being watched. Before leaving for good, Pippa observes them one final time from a rooftop. She then sets down her binoculars and walks away. The end. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time.